Restrictions may apply. Plans and costs for coverage may vary.
Call Protect My Car for details.
In these hard economic times, you've got to do whatever you can to save money. One of our biggest expenses can be our cars, especially when unexpected repair bills hit. Not anymore. If you do own a car, truck, or SUV made from 1999 or higher, you could stop paying for car repairs. That's right. You might not have to pay a penny to have it repaired. Just dial **1149 on your mobile phone now to see if you qualify. You must have an automobile made from 1999 or higher, and all repairs for your engine, transmission, and much more can become a thing of the past. Dial **1149 on your mobile phone today and get your car protected before your next repair bill hits. That's right, total protection for your car and no more repair bills. Just dial **1149 on your mobile phone now to see if your car qualifies. That's **1149. Never pay for car repairs again. Just dial **1149 on your mobile phone now. Dial **1149.
Prepare for glory!
I wanna know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready?
I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly. Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line. Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, proud members of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. You can, of course, find them at FTFPodNet on Twitter. You can find me at SportsFanaticMB on Twitter, and my illustrious co-host, Mr. Dennis Bennett, at Culture_Coach on Twitter. We, of course, have a new co-host joining us today, which I'm excited to get into here in just a minute, so we're not going to stay long here in the introduction. Of course, there are a ton of other great podcasts on the network as well. Jim Day of the FF Champs, Adam Ronis and Dr. Roto of SiriusXM Fantasy Football, Bob Lung of the award-winning Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, the IDT Tipster, Dwayne McFarland, and Blake Sullivan, and many other great podcasts, and you can find all of them on fulltimefantasy.com. Check them out. We've got all of your fantasy info and content there. For today's episode, we are going to review the entire preseason Week 2 games. We will preview the Monday Night Football game that is likely going to go on when you hear this, or possibly, obviously, the day after, but we will preview some of our thoughts on it as the game will be starting here in just about an hour and a half. We will, of course, talk about all the breaking news with Josh Gordon, Antonio Brown, among others. Cannot wait to get into it again. We have a new co-host joining us today, so let's just jump right in. Let's get Dennis in here, and then let's introduce the co-host that will be joining me throughout the season to talk a little fantasy football.
Hello!
And as always, we have Mr. Dennis Bennett with us after a long weekend in Canton, Ohio. Dennis, how are you doing today, buddy?
Man, I am still on a high from yesterday's expo. It was phenomenal. Bunch of great people there. Got to interact. I can't tell you how many times somebody came up and was like, you know, I love the show. You and Matt, I'm like, oh, well, I'm looking forward to September. Matt and I get to meet in person. And they're like, what? You guys have never met each other? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I keep telling everybody. They ask, they ask, and I'm like, yeah, we've actually never met in person. We've met all through fantasy football and fantasy league. So it's going to be exciting, and I can't wait to hear more about that in just a minute. However, I do want to introduce our other new co-host that will be joining me throughout the football season, and hopefully even longer, and that is Mr. Matthew Fox. We have had him on before, talking about the AFC West, and then obviously the very popular Game of Thrones episodes. He was the one who jumped on with me. Huge movie guy as well. You can find him at Nighthawk7734 on Twitter. Matt, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me and Dennis today.
Doing pretty good. Just trying not to melt here at Colorado Springs. We set some heat records today, which is great for a town that's 50-50 on whether you have air conditioning.
How hot did it get?
The last I looked, they said 95.
Wow. Okay, so you guys are really getting up there. I know some people, I'm sure, know, if you follow me on Twitter and throughout the show, I've talked about my family lives in Colorado Springs as well. So I'm sure they're not that bothered with it, living in Texas for as long as they have. But yeah, I can imagine 95 in Colorado. That's actually only 5 degrees less than what it was here for a lot of today. So that is actually getting pretty hot up there. I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, it's going to be spectacular for the game tonight.
Oh, it is in Denver. I forgot about that. I can't wait to have that. We will for sure, as I mentioned in the intro, break down the Monday Night Football game today. As also mentioned, Matthew is a huge Broncos fan, so I'm excited to get your breakdown of the game tonight and on the team. Before we jump into any of the breaking news or anything like that, I do want to get into the Midwest Expo. Obviously, we've talked about it a whole lot lately. I kind of want to hit on that first. So, Dennis, just give us a recap of what it was like being up there, interacting with everybody, and then there's a merchandise, if I could speak correctly, giveaway that you want to talk about as well.
So, we had I tweeted out a picture of our booth. My wife manned the booth with me, said he being gender insensitive. No, she was up there with me. We had a great time. She is a seasoned trade show veteran. And so she loves to talk. So she was real, casting out there, reeling them in and setting the hook. And then I would spin the wheel of knowledge and we would chat about whatever came up, the NFC North, their quarterbacks. Bob Harris and I had a nice little chat about Leonard Fournette. It was pretty awesome to meet Bob. And I don't know if you are on Sirius and listen to his show, Football Diehards. He does 7 days a week during the season on Sirius, man. That's just crazy.
Yeah, I can't
Anyways,
imagine.
I met Kyle Richardson. The guys from Dynasty Trades HQ were there. Kyle was fantastic, super personable. Loved talking with him. Jay Mike Check, Mr. FF Warm Hug himself. The Devy Owners Manual, Chris Allen. I got to meet all of them earlier this year. We did a meetup down in Cincinnati, so I did meet a number of guys down there, which was pretty cool. But as far as the expo went, it started off with a charity draft. So I'm going to post my team here later with a link, and you can go bet on me to win this thing. You make a donation to the charity, and you can bet on me to win this. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about my team, which means it'll probably be good. But I don't know. I just wasn't feeling it there. I got sniped a couple times. We were live drafting on Sleeper while we were putting stickers on the board. And at one point, I put Anthony Miller's sticker up. And then when I went to draft my person, I drafted Delaney Walker. Oh. And then, a round and a half later, somebody was going nuts trying to find the Anthony Miller sticker, and I'm like, what are you doing? I already picked him. He's like, well, he's still in the... It turns out somebody had already picked Delaney Walker, too. It was kind of a cluster that I created. We got through it, though. Matt Williams with the 7-7 in his name there, was able to fix that and get us back on track. I did a nice panel, did a couple panels, one about snake draft strategies where we actually worked through about 10 rounds of a snake draft, and then we took questions from the audience about why we had a certain strategy, what was our approach to it. I was drafting in the middle of the pack, and it seems like this offseason, historically for me, I've kind of always liked to be in the middle. But this offseason, I've gravitated towards the ends to be closer to the turns. And so I kind of like to be in the first 4 so I can get one of the big 4 running backs. Right. Or in the last 3 or 4 where I can get, a running back with top 5 upside plus a top-tier wide receiver, or maybe even 2 running backs with top 5 upside. So it was a little different being in the middle during that panel. I really enjoyed it. Shane Manila from Dynasty Trades HQ was there. Jeremy Barker, he was on the panel. Bob and Kyle from Football Diehards. It was Michelle from Ball Blast was there as well. It was we did a couple different panels, so we had a fantastic time. We got to shake some hands and kiss some babies. Well, nobody brought any babies, but, we shook a lot of hands. Looking forward to next year.
Yeah, so am I, man. I saw a lot of people posting about everything and a lot of the pictures being taken. Obviously, some of the after-party stuff with Dynasty Nerds. I think they posted it earlier today, or Rich posted it, or maybe it was Garrett. One of those guys posted it and saw all you guys together, and it's something I'm looking forward to. I cannot wait for it to happen again next year because I will definitely be able to make it up there for that. Sounds like a lot of fun, and I am extremely sad that I got to miss it, but I'm looking forward to next year. What is the merchandise giveaway that you wanted to do?
So we did candy bars with numbers on them. So when people come to the booth, they would, they could. My wife deemed it tweet and eat. Take a piece of candy, get a little candy bar, you get to eat it, and tweet the number at the show's handle, Roundtable FF, and then we'll pick some people to win some merchandise. So what we can do here is we can put them in the randomizer, and we'll pick 5 people. How's that sound? You want to give away? We can do T-shirts, water bottles, coffee mugs, beanies, yada, yada, yada. Whatever we have on the merch store. 5 sound like a good number?
Works for me.
All right. I wish I had brought the wheel in we were using to spin so I could make that spinning noise. All right. The first person hitting the randomizer is the one and only John Hesterman. Oh, what was John's? I wrote the name down, but I didn't write the Twitter handle. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. John _Hesterman. So John is our first winner. So, and then the instructions is you need to DM myself or Matt so we can get your address so we can ship you the merchandise. All right, our next winner, hitting the randomizers, one and only Tim Torch from Under the Helmet.
All right. I know Mr. Tim.
Yeah. He is at Tim NFL. Very nice. All right. So that's 2. Our third one going into the randomizer. Oh, this is nice. Perry Robertson, one of our listeners. It was very nice to meet Perry. He is at thatdeal_22. That's DATDEAL _22. I'm partial to guys with underscores in their names, as you may know. All right, we're going to give it another spin. And coming up is Dub Diesel, as in Diesel Dobert. DIESELDOEBERT.
We got one more?
One more going in. And that is Mr. Danny Lop 123.
All right, so I guess they need to DM you or myself, and then we will get that set up. Are we just randomly picking the prizes that they're winning, or do they get to pick?
Well, what do you want to do? Since you didn't get to come, I'll let you make that decision.
You know what? I'll let them pick. You guys can pick whatever you want. I'm willing to work with you guys on that. We've got as Dennis found out very late Sunday night, I was able to actually get another shop up and going with our Knights logo on there, which I love. It was a long, hard process to get that all done. So we've got even more stuff and more swag coming on a different site. So I'm okay with letting them pick. They can pick whatever they want. The first 5 winners of this giveaway, they can pick something, and we will get it sent to them, if that's cool with you.
Cool. Congratulations, all. Congratulations.
Yes, we're looking forward to hearing from you guys, and as soon as we do, we will get you guys hooked up with that stuff. All right. So now, with all that done with the Midwest Expo, let's get in and start talking about some football and some of the breaking news that happened over the weekend.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
All right, so for starters, I guess the big news that came out this weekend was the reinstatement of Josh Gordon. He got reinstated. Or conditionally reinstated. He is back with the Panthers. The Panthers. I cannot talk today. The New England Patriots. Was interesting to me. Obviously, I'm a huge Josh Gordon fan. I'm happy that he got reinstated. Hopefully, this means he's turning his life around. This is probably his fourth chance, if I'm remembering correctly. So we will see what happens. A little surprised that the Patriots, I guess should not be surprised he retained his rights because of his talent, but the fact that he is still with the Patriots, especially with everything that happened. Dennis, Matt, your guys' thoughts on Josh Gordon being reinstated with the Patriots, and what do you think his fantasy outlook could be in 2019?
I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1.
All right.
No, I love Josh Gordon, and as somebody who is in recovery myself, I'm well aware of the struggles that can occur with that condition. I don't have all of the facts. That it's a very personal thing when it comes to relapse and maintaining your sobriety and being in recovery. It sounds like, from what I've read, that he didn't test positive last year, but he missed the test because he felt too vulnerable, and he went and checked himself in to get help so that he wouldn't relapse. Mm-hmm. And if that's the story, then I guess I understand maybe Goodell being a little more lenient with it and saying, look, we'll conditionally reinstate you, versus giving him the Justin Blackmon treatment. It seems like Gordon is trying. From a fantasy perspective, it's eternally frustrating. I've got him on one team. After it happened, I kind of jokingly threw out that he was on the block, but I'm quite confident that I'm not going to be able to get what I think is value for him, and I'm not looking to just dump him off my roster like he's Damian Williams.
Yeah, I think that's where I was at. There's a couple of things. First, I thought Dennis addressed his issues pretty beautifully, but the one thing that jumped out to me is it seems like just with every other season, everything comes up roses for New England. 2 months ago we were thinking, oh God, they don't have any receivers, and now, of course, right on the cusp of the season, he comes back. The most happy person has to be Tom Brady, looking around, seeing Josh Gordon come back. And, well, I don't think he'll be wide receiver 1. He'll be wide receiver 1 for the Patriots. And that's what puts him in an interesting fantasy position right now, because I've seen people dump him for a lot of things, or, can I get a first-round pick? Do I have to settle for a second-round pick? This, to me, is the absolute worst time to be trying to trade him, because you're never going to get the right value. If he comes back and he's terrible, which I don't think will happen, you made out. But if he comes back and he looks anything like he did when he played for them last year, taking a simple draft pick, or I saw one guy, he's like, yeah, I think I'm going to trade Josh Gordon straight up for Mark Andrews. And I'm like, no. If you wait a couple of weeks and see if he can integrate back and if he can start to flash, then you'll have a better idea of value if you want to get rid of him. For me, it worked out really great. I'm in a redraft vampire league where I'm the vampire, and they already drafted because they were just excited to draft. So I was able to scoop up Josh Gordon and slap him on my team and instantly have a much better player than I had previously going at wide receiver. So Deshaun Hamilton, now back to the bench. Josh Gordon, welcome to the team.
Well, I love the Deshaun Hamilton drop there, too. What do you guys think how do you guys think this might affect N'Keal Harry's fantasy value, at least for the 2019 season? Again, we have not seen Josh Gordon play an entire season in quite a while due to the suspensions that's happened. So, assuming he plays, though, all 16 games, he's able to, stay on the right road with the help of the people around him and the Patriots. Do you think this affects N'Keal Harry immensely, or just a little bit, or not at all?
Take it, Matt.
I would say N'Keal Harry's a long-term bet, not necessarily a great 2019 bet, because let's be honest, Tom Brady's 42 and the Patriots are looking at the Super Bowl, and it's very possible that 6 weeks into the regular season, their receiving core is Julian Edelman, Josh Gordon, Demaryius Thomas, and Ben Watson, which looks a heck of a lot different than what we thought it might be when N'Keal Harry was drafted. So all those people that were hoping they were going to get some instant bang for their buck, I think might have to slow their roll just a little bit.
Yeah, I like that, if Gordon is able to play at the beginning of the season, that helps Harry. It takes the pressure off him being a top pick. And with the prevalence of 3 wide receiver sets nowadays, this is a situation where it could help Harry be a little more relevant, but frustrating from a fantasy perspective, because you might not know, when is he gonna pop? When will be his time? So that could be frustrating. Gordon last year in New England, for the 10 games or 11 games he played, he had his highest completion percentage or catch percentage of his career. So I don't know if that's it's probably a testament to Tom Brady's accuracy. And he was 11th in the NFL in average depth of target, or yards per target, at 10.4 yards for the year. But with he would have been, actually, if I look at his New England numbers, would have tied him at 9th with T.Y. Hilton in yards per target. So he definitely provides that downfield threat, and he's big and he's fast. So for Harry, it takes the pressure off Harry. I agree with Matt. It's completely Harry is we play Dynasty mostly, and Harry is still at the top of the rookie draft boards for the most part.
This means potentially about New England's offense. I mean, James White didn't go anywhere. Rex Burkhead didn't go anywhere. They added Harris as a running back. They still have Michelle. The rich get richer, I guess.
Yeah, they always seem to. Real quick before we move on to the AB news, I just want to ask you, so looking at his ADP for the FFWC, he's still going right around 111. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of ahead and behind him and see if you would take him over them. So a couple of guys going right ahead of him, James Washington and Tyrell Williams. Would you take him over either, neither, or both?
I'd take him over both.
Is him Harry or is him Gordon?
Gordon.
Yeah.
So, who were the players again?
He's going right behind Tyrell Williams and James Washington.
Dynasty or redraft?
Redraft, FFWC, because the FFWC is mostly redraft. We'll stick with redraft for now.
Boy, Washington really seems to be establishing himself as the number 2 in Pittsburgh, and both of those offenses are going to be pretty comparable, I think. Actually, I think Pittsburgh, while not throwing 650 or however the hell many passes Ben threw last year, are probably still going to throw more passes than New England. So I'd take him over Tyrell, but it would be an emotional pick for me between Washington and Gordon, and it might I could see me going Washington because there is some fear that Gordon isn't gonna make it back, or he's not gonna play the whole season.
Gotcha.
So I think I would put Gordon between the two of them.
Okay. And then a couple guys going right behind him. I would assume you wouldn't take either of these 3 over him, but I'm going to ask Golden Tate, Devin Funchess, and N'Keal Harry. Again, we'll just approach it from a redraft perspective. Would any 3 of those jump Gordon for you guys?
Not for me.
The only one I think might jump for me would be Tate, and that would be if I have some indication as to when Gordon is coming back. So if Gordon isn't going to play until week 4 and Tate's not going to play until week 4, I could see taking Tate because I think he's going to be a little more consistent. And potentially he's the number one in New York. And if that team comes together at all, Tate could put up Tate might get 30 more receptions than Gordon. And so I might take Tate over him.
For me, I think the way they set it up, it certainly feels like they're planning on Josh Gordon week 1. I think that's why they made the reinstatement so early in the preseason. I wouldn't actually be surprised if we see him play in the week 3 preseason game.
That would be very interesting, in my opinion. All right, so AB, more drama has followed him into Oakland. So we already talked about the feet a couple episodes ago, and then the helmet stuff as well. So, I mean, I don't really even know where to go from here. Obviously, he's trying to play in a shut helmet, and those are just not allowed in the NFL anymore due to them not being approved by the NFLPA and the NFL due to the lawsuits. Really, I think that, to me, the biggest thing is the lawsuits. They're paying out, I believe it's upwards of $1 billion, something like that, to players due to them hiding facts or hiding stuff about concussions a long time ago. So they're trying to do this for player safety. A lot of players were told last year that they could have one more year as kind of like the grandfather rule to allow them to wear those helmets, but they needed to find a new helmet by this year. Antonio Brown had a grievance filed with the NFL. He found a new helmet, tried to get that approved. It failed the testing, so they told him he needed to get a new helmet. He did not show up to camp the other day. I did see reports that he will be back to camp, I believe, as early as tomorrow. We saw Mike Mayock come out and make a statement pretty much saying that he needs to either be all in or all out. I really think it was Mike Mayock in allowing John Gruden to kind of stay the good guy there and be like, no, we still love AB and all this stuff and make Mike Mayock the bad guy, kind of good cop, bad cop thing. But just give me your guys' perspectives on everything that has happened with AB, and do you think he's going to be worth the drama that Oakland has brought on in 2019?
Well, Pro Football Talk reported that Brown did show up again today. He did come back in after Mike Mayock basically laid down the law and was like, man, I about had enough of your shit. So that doesn't mean he's going to stay. As of right now, Pro Football Talk is reporting that he's a long shot to play in the 3rd preseason game, but on track to be ready for week 1. You know, I get it. You're used to a certain type of helmet and it gets comfortable. It's like your favorite pair of jeans or your favorite shoes, only it can save your life. So if I don't own any shares of AB on any of my teams, so I'm not directly affected by it, but I'm also not going out and trying to buy on the dip from the crazy either, because honestly, I think I'd rather have Josh Gordon than AB, just because maybe I'm more sympathetic to Gordon's cause, and AB just seems crazy now.
Yeah, I think the big winner in this entire thing is the producers of Hard Knocks, who have just stumbled into a storyline that will carry them all season.
I think they knew that, though.
Well, I think they expected that there would be some fun times with Antonio Brown in Oakland. I don't know if they knew it was going to be the story of the preseason. Right. And honestly, if you've watched the first 2 episodes, they need Antonio Brown's crazy because it is pretty dry. Derek Carr seems like a lovely guy. He is not a TV star. But for me, I have 1 share of Antonio Brown, and I wish I didn't. I kind of feel like you can't really trade him for anything worth realistic value, and I already thought he was going to take a little bit of dip from the Antonio Brown that we've seen before, but now the time that you're losing, I think it was in the last episode of Hard Knocks actually, where Gruden was talking about you can't get time back. You know, you get the reward out for the work you put in, kind of referencing that it was tough not having Antonio Brown out there because he's new to the team, he's new to the offense, he's new to the quarterback. They can't see what he can do. He can't build any rapport, and obviously he's a great and professional receiver who's achieved a lot, but he's also kind of a head case, and making this transition, you know, if he has to learn to play with a new helmet and he thinks that's going to throw him off, that's even more reason he should be out there trying it, hoping to get into a game to see what it's like, so that the first time that he experiences that isn't on Monday night with all the lights on in Oakland on September 9th, but it's shaping up that way. And for the Raiders, they kind of have to go all in. I'm not surprised Mayock made those comments, because if you look at their offense without Antonio Brown, they've got Terrell Williams and some prayers. I mean, they have a rookie running back. They let their best receiver from last year, which was Jared Cook, go to the Saints. They have J.J. Nelson, who is going to be on his third or fourth team. Antonio Brown was going to be the big draw, and Tyrell Williams could be a decent weapon if there's something on the other side. But if he's now like your wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 option, that's not very good for Derek Carr either, for a year where they said they're putting a lot of pressure on, wanting to see him get back to some kind of a good form. So I think this is probably the biggest nightmare for the Raiders and for John Gruden, who wants to make some kind of a splash and show some kind of progress before they go to Las Vegas.
Marcel Aitman season.
Yeah, sure.
Who?
Marcel Aitman.
No, it was a joke.
Yeah, I know. I was playing along.
All right, so the last little bit of news we've got here is a little bit of injury news for DK Metcalf. He had a knee scope. Pete Carroll, who is semi-notorious for being a little bit proactive or optimistic for injury timelines, says that it's not serious and he should be back by week 1. However, I will kind of emulate something Matt just said there about Antonio Brown, and time is not something you can get back. DK Metcalf came in as one of the more raw prospects at the wide receiver position this year. I think he needs time on the field and getting into a better kind of, my goodness, I can't think of the word now, but because I want to say relationship, and that's not at all. He does not have a relationship with Russell Wilson. That would be Ciara. I'm an idiot, and I cannot focus because I don't know what's wrong with me. He needs to get just more reps with Russell Wilson.
Take another shot of NyQuil.
That's what I'm about to do. I'm just going to let you guys... I'm just going to hit record, and when I wake up in the next couple hours, I'll just hit stop, and I'll figure out where you guys stop talking. It's embarrassing. But anyways, he needs to get more reps with Russell Wilson. He's not going to get that now. Even if he's back by week 1, I do think that he's going to kind of lose his spot on the wide receiver depth chart, at least for now, as that wide receiver 2 right on the other side of Tyler Lockett. I don't know specifically if Matt is a fan of DK Metcalf, so what is your guys' takes on the DK Metcalf injury and his outlook for 2019?
What do you
Obviously,
think, Matt?
Not going to be helpful for Seattle. A team that really trying to find some weapons, and we know they have Tyler Lockett, but Doug Baldwin's gone. Will Dissly is coming back from knee injury. Russell Wilson needs some targets too. You never exactly know what's going to be the situation with their running backs. I know they've mentioned that they're going to try to get them more involved in the passing game. There's not a lot of options out there for Seattle, and this is definitely going to be a blow. Be interesting to see how quickly he comes back. He seemed like a rookie based on some of the things we learned at the Combine that needed as much time and work as possible to try to maximize his skills in the NFL. So it's got to be kind of a blow, especially since Seattle is in a relatively tough division. We're going to see where San Francisco's at tonight, but the Rams are still there. Arizona's hoping to ascend. I think you're going to have to put up points if you want to do well in the NFC West. And it's tougher to do when you don't have those weapons out there to make it happen.
Yeah, when Pete Carroll says somebody has a slight knee injury, I look at it, the range of outcomes could be anything from he tripped and scraped his knee and has a Band-Aid to his leg has been amputated from the hip. So we don't really know what's going on with Metcalf. So let's just assume it was a quick knee scope and he's going to be out for 3 or 4 weeks. We saw Maurice Claret come back from a knee scope in 2 weeks when he was here at Columbus. So they can be a relatively minor procedure. But there was, David Moore flashed last year. Jerron Brown, he's been getting some good press this training camp. They got Keenan Reynolds, who's set to be their slot receiver, according to our lads. along with Tyler Lockett. So they have a little bit of depth. None of them quite have the physical tools that DK Metcalf has. You just don't find that kind of, that's a rarity. He's big, fast, and strong. So I think they've got enough. They played a bunch of games last year without Doug Baldwin. So I think when they look at it, they're well aware that they can play and score some points without the Doug Baldwin, without a DK Metcalf. It may require some adjustment to some of the game plan, but I think they're going to be just fine. They were never going to throw the ball 500 times anyways, so not having DK Metcalf out there lifting the lid off the defense, maybe it tightens things up a little bit, but Tyler Lockett has shown that he's a pretty good wide receiver, and he was always going to be the wide receiver one. And now it's just going to be up to, Moore and Brown and Reynolds to step up. If Dissly can come back, there was a nice write-up on Dynasty Nerds a few weeks ago about Uncle Will Dissly. I forget. Boy, you'd think I should remember the writers' names there since I'm the editor. But they wrote up a nice article about Dissly's progress coming back. You can go to Dynasty Nerds and check that out. It's a free article. So Dissly is a good tight end. Nick Vannett has flashed a little bit. And I like that they brought in Jacob Hollister from New England. He was Josh Allen's tight end at Wyoming. He just has to overcome the injuries. He has been so fragile, but he's got really good speed, and he's a guy that can get down the seam in the middle of the field and make some plays. So they're not completely without options.
Some injuries and lack of things last year to get them up in the playoff hunt, but they definitely lost a lot more pieces of that defense. And if their defense is woeful, that to me puts a lot more pressure on the offense. And I think the last couple of years, one of their biggest issues has been not being able to block long enough to open up holes for running backs and allow Russell Wilson to sit back there and find folks.
So they led the league in rushing last year, and they had 370, almost 500 attempts. I think 534 attempts was their rushing attempts last year, even with that offensive line. The opportunity, they've neglected that line, but I think they got DJ Fluker back. Fetty has been a little iffy. Maybe some of the backups, Ethan Pocic, Jamarco Jones coming in their first and second year. So there's some opportunity if they can get some people to maybe take some steps. I think that they still want to run the ball. I feel like from a fantasy football perspective, I could see the split being, 275 carries for Carson and, 200 carries for, Rashad Penny. So even though I don't think Penny looked great this week, he needs to, run forward. Stop cutting back on everything.
Yeah.
Stop reversing the field. We know you're fast. Just run forward.
We'll get into Penny here in a minute for sure.
First and 10 at the Lions 29, and Prescott goes screen right. Elliott down the right side to the 25, to the 20, to the 10. Elliott to the pylon. Zeke Elliott, touchdown. 38 on the screen.
Second down at 10, takes the snap, gives it. Chubb runs, he's in the 15, he's in the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There goes Chubb, he's in the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Chubb Alaba Hub.
we just saw some of the, almost all the games for preseason week 2. We have one more game tonight, which again we will break down here in just a minute. We wanted to touch on some of the, not necessarily breakout guys, but guys that caught our attention in week 2. Had some good plays or players that we're looking forward to possibly having good careers in the NFL. We're going to start with the first game on the list, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Philadelphia won 24-10. On Philadelphia's side, Miles Sanders, a guy that I have been propping up a lot into a kind of committee situation there in Philadelphia. Obviously, a lot of people not sure what he's going to do. Looked fantastic in that game. Now, his stat line, not great. I mean, if you look at the yards per carry, it was 5 for 31 yards, a 6.2 yard carry, but he had a really good 16-yard run, and then a couple other ones that looked really good. I'm excited to see what he keeps doing. And then on the Jacksonville side, a guy that stood out for me was Gardner Minshew. So he went 19 for 29 for 202 yards, a guy that I think could easily become the backup to Nick Foles there, and a guy that in that Washington State offense, that air raid offense in college, looked really, really good. In the Jets game, the guy that's been standing out for me really in the past 2 games, a lot of this is due to the fact that Le'Veon Bell is not playing. Adam Gase has come out and said that Le'Veon Bell is not going to play at all in the preseason, is Ty Montgomery. So the Jets won 22-10 over the Falcons, so the Falcons probably could have won that game, a couple drop passes in the end zone. But Ty Montgomery, 7 carries for 36 yards and a touchdown. It did look really good. Also liked what I saw out of Robbie Anderson. There was a guy, however, on Atlanta's side that really stood out, and that's Dennis's guy. Now, I know Dennis, due to him being at the Midwest Expo and everything, didn't get a chance to watch a lot of football this weekend, but your guy Quadri Allison had himself a very good day. 9 for 44 for a 4.9 yard average. I think he's moving closer and closer to securing that backup spot there behind Devonta Freeman, possibly even working himself into the workload a little bit for Atlanta. In the next game of the afternoon, we had the Cincinnati Bengals and the Washington Redskins. The Bengals winning 23-13. I thought both rookie quarterbacks looked really good in this game. So Ryan Finley, 20 for 26, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Dwayne Haskins really improved on his first game, throwing 7 for 14 for 114 yards and 1 touchdown. So I really liked what both of those guys showed. I believe Jay Gruden came out earlier this weekend and said that it looks like Case Keenum is probably going to be the starter. We don't get to see what goes on in practice, so I'd imagine he's saying that or making that call for a reason. But I really like the improvement I saw out of Dwayne Haskins in Week 2. And then Ryan Finley looked extremely impressive to me, and is someone I think could easily step in and be the backup to Andy Dalton, possibly even get some work if Andy Dalton does get hurt. Let's see here. What do we got next? The Baltimore Ravens and the Green Bay Packers. By the way, if you guys did not see the really cool interaction between Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers after the game, I retweeted it on Twitter and talked about how I loved it. It's a really cool interaction between those two guys. The kind of respect that Lamar Jackson shows Aaron Rodgers, and a little joke that they have at the end of their conversation was fairly interesting. Not much going on in that game, though. Obviously, Lamar had a great run, was called back because of a penalty. They did win 26-13. The player that kind of stood out for me on the Ravens side, though, was Trace McSorley. A lot of people were kind of, I would say, not in on him with the draft process and everything. A guy that put up some really good numbers at Penn State, but then had a really bad year last year with Penn State. Did go 8 for 13, just 74 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, but I liked a little bit what I saw out of him. Could possibly end up winning that backup job there, or at least the third guy behind Lamar Jackson and RG3. Josh Jacobs looked good for the Oakland Raiders as they took on the Arizona Cardinals in that last game Thursday night. The Raiders winning 33-26, so that game was not nearly as close as the final score indicates. Start with the Raiders first, because I know a couple of, or at least Matt wants to touch on the Cardinals side here, as do I with Kyler Murray. So for me, really, Josh Jacobs was the only standout. As someone who has not been that high on him the entire offseason and draft process, he did look fairly good to me. He may be winning me over a little bit. I might have to change my mind on. I still don't think he's as good as David Montgomery and Miles Sanders, but he looked a lot better than I thought he would with that Oakland Raiders offense. Kyler Murray, though, in his second game, really struggled in this one. While, again, I still don't think they're really showing much of their offense, and I do think that the I was going to say foul. The penalties that they called on Kyler Murray for false starts because of him clapping his hands, although it technically is in the rule book, I thought was a little, I don't want to say bush league, but I did not feel like the refs needed to call that. That is really what kind of put Kyler Murray in some bad situations in that game, but he did not look good at all. It was just a big departure from what we saw in the first week. So he went 3 for 8 for just 12 yards. Matt, your thoughts on Kyler Murray in that game against Oakland?
Well, it's not even so much for me about Murray as, it was good that they were able to take him. They went and drafted a lot of wide receivers and stuff to put around him. But anyone who watched much of Arizona last year would have seen that one of their biggest problems on offense was they couldn't block anything. And that does not look to have gotten much better. Kyler Murray didn't have much of a line in front of him. And no matter how good of a passer you are or how dynamic your plays are, if you can't block anyone, you're not going to succeed. And I think that's probably was a bigger question going into this experiment. Could they sufficiently protect him and make improvement on the offensive line? And what I saw on that game Thursday night told me that they didn't, and it could very well be a long season. But at least Kyler Murray, unlike Josh Rosen, can run away from some people. So he'll get killed.
Yeah, but I think if you saw, so Murray ran a few times, and I think it might have been Farrell or Arden Key, one of their defensive linemen. He wasn't running away from them. I mean, they didn't catch him, but he wasn't picking up ground.
Right.
So they couldn't get around the corner on him. I think he's going to find that NFL linebackers and defensive linemen are a little faster than he's used to trying to run away from.
He'll get a lot of practice to see if he can outrun him, apparently.
All right, so next up, the first game on Friday, we had the Buffalo Bills and the Carolina Panthers. Buffalo winning 27-14. Not much going on Buffalo's side except for my guy, Tyree Jackson, someone that I believe, I can't remember if it was Dennis or Matt. It was probably Dennis. Trashing my guy on this podcast, saying he wouldn't make it in the NFL. Looked fairly good. I liked what I saw out of him. I was not going to be a starting quarterback like I hoped he would in Los Angeles behind Phillip Rivers someday, but did go 4 for 10 for 68 yards. Did unfortunately throw an interception.
What was that? He went what?
4 for 10.
4 for 10?
Oh yeah.
40%?
Hey.
Okay.
He's gonna be.
He's no Trace McSorley.
Hey, you know what? You're right. He's better than Trace McSorley. You don't have to worry about it. But he did get 27 yards on 8 carries as well. I think he's going to improve. I hope that he is able to win that backup spot there, or at least be the third quarterback for now in Buffalo, because I think he's got a lot of talent. For the Panthers side, not much for me. Did see a little bit of run out of Jordan Scarlett, a rookie that a lot of people are talking about possibly taking over that second spot over Cameron Artis-Payne. We've seen him in Carolina for quite a while. Really hasn't been able to do anything. And then, of course, Elijah Holyfield as well. Played a little bit, but nothing to write home about in that game. Next up on the Friday slate, we had the Chicago Bears and the New York Giants. The Bears losing 13-32. For the Bears, nothing really that stuck out for me. However, on the Giants side, we did see Daniel Jones come back to earth a little bit. Instead of going 5 for 5, he only missed 3 passes in this game. Still, actually, I thought it looked fairly good. 161 yards and a touchdown. A lot of people might be changing. I know it's only preseason, but I think a lot of people can start really, not necessarily saying Dave Gettleman was right, but realizing maybe he wasn't as wrong as we all thought he was on Daniel Jones. He might be a little bit of a better quarterback than we were all giving him credit for. The last game Friday night, we saw the Miami Dolphins and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucks pulling out the 16-14 win. I honestly did not get to see much of this game yet, so I don't know much of what's going on. Just looking at the stats, though, nobody blew anything away here for the Dolphins or the Buccaneers. So it did look like Rosen had a fairly good night. 10 for 18 for 102 yards. Again, that's really the biggest quarterback competition going into the season between him and Ryan Fitzpatrick. The Saturday slate, we had the Cleveland Browns and the Indianapolis Colts opening up the first game. The Browns winning 21-18. 2 things in this game. So the Browns, Hollywood Higgins continues to shine and look like he's pretty much, at least in my opinion, solidified the wide receiver 3 spot, especially with Antonio Callaway being suspended. And on the Colts side, Jacoby Brissett looked really good in this game against a decent Browns defense. While they did sit a bunch of their starters, he still looked good, a lot better than what we saw out of him a couple years ago when he was called into action after only being on the team for, I believe, a week after the trade from the Patriots. Much better team around him, much better offensive line around him as well. If Andrew Luck has to sit, I think Jacoby Brissett's going to be just fine. Matt, what were your thoughts on Brissett in that game against the Browns?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Luck, because that's the thing that I've been thinking about as somebody who owns about 15 shares of Andrew Luck in Dynasty. His ever-morphing injury, seeing what Jacoby Brissett looked like in one of those really deeper Dynasty leagues, I have Jacoby Brissett because I have Andrew Luck, but, I wondered what you guys thought. At what point in time would you start trying to hedge your bets?
I think it depends on your team construction. So in Superflex, I tend to, if I know a quarterback has an injury history, I'll try to pick up that backup. At this point in the season, I feel like with Andrew Luck, you've got to get Brissett. I know, like, for me, I took over a couple orphans that had Marcus Mariota on the team. And regardless of whether or not you think he can be an average NFL quarterback or not, I went out, the first trade I made on those teams was to go out and acquire Ryan Tannehill. Because I don't know, I have concerns still whether or not Mariota can even feel the ball with his pinky. And I think he's still having trouble with that nerve, and they're trying to minimize it. So when it comes to Luck, we've seen it play out before where it's not been serious, and he missed 16 games. So I look at it and I go, well, if I've got Luck, if I can try to get Brissett on my team, and I've got the space, if I have to move my RB6 or wide receiver 6 to make space to carry an extra quarterback, then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think the real dagger to my heart if Luck sits out is I have a Superflex team where I have Mahomes and I had Baker Mayfield. I flipped Mayfield for Luck because I like Luck better. Being my Waterloo.
Well, speaking of Mariota, they came up and played the New England Patriots on Saturday. For me, Damian Harris stood out for the Patriots. 14 carries for 80 yards, a 5.7 average. Nick Brossette, a guy out of LSU last year who I also really liked, went undrafted, ended up landing with the Patriots. I thought looked okay, though his numbers don't really show it. Likely he's not going to make the team, though, with the amount of running backs they have there already. The Tennessee Titans, so two things. Marcus Mariota did not look that bad. Actually had a I don't want to say laid out, but had a very interesting touchdown run, which caused him to be flipped in the air. Ryan Tannehill, though, also looked good as well. So that quarterback battle that we talked about on Thursday is still heating up, and I think this week could really solidify which one gets the start. For me, the big standout was Alex Barnes. I know a lot of people are talking about Jeremy McNichols and what he did in the receiving game. He did catch a touchdown, also got flipped into the end zone. But Alex Barnes really stood out running the ball. 7 carries for 42 yards, a 6-point-yard average. Did look really good, though, from the runs that I saw. A guy that I think could, in the long run, take over Dion Lewis' spot as the backup to Derrick Henry, or just get a role in this offense altogether. As we all know, I am not that big a fan of Derrick Henry as it is. The next game up, we had the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Chiefs lost 7-17. For the Chiefs, though, Darwin Thompson continues to impress and is looking like a guy who, if you are not a Damian Williams believer like Mr. Dennis Bennett here, and I would love to get Matt's opinion on Damian Williams here in a minute because we've not had him on the pod, so I don't know what he thinks of Williams. But Damian Williams, if you're not a fan of him, though he actually did not play in this game, but Darwin Thompson, 30 yards on 4 carries for a 7.5 average. I mean, he's just continued to impress the past couple games. Really interested to see the role that he gets possibly in this Week 3 game when it is kind of considered the dress rehearsal for most NFL teams going into the season. Matt, your thoughts on Damian Williams, since we have not had you on here. Are you pro Damian Williams or against Damian Williams?
I guess I'm cautiously optimistic. I have a couple of shares. One place where I have Damian, or both places where I have Damian Williams, I handcuffed him with Thompson just in case, but I did a player profile on him for the Fantasy Life app blog earlier in the off season, and I mean the potential if you were the RB1 in this Kansas offense is pretty good. So there's some potential there, but we've just never seen him carry that kind of load. His sample size from the end of last year is so small. It's hard to have incredible confidence in him, but I'm still hopeful.
From last year and the year before that and the year before that and the year before that and the year before that.
Look, he has opportunity. Opportunity is one of the best things that a player can have for fantasy purposes, whether he does anything. I'm also not a fan of Carlos Hyde, so
all right. I like it.
Optimism there.
The Matt's got to stick together. I like it. I love Carlos Hyde. I just don't think he's going to be that big of a deal in Kansas City. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mason Rudolph got the start here, a guy that a lot of people thought might end up replacing Big Ben, especially after all the retirement talk he had done the past couple seasons. Doesn't quite look like Big Ben is ready to retire just yet. Mason Rudolph, though, not really impressive from what I saw. 10 for 15, 77 yards. Though James Washington, I think, really continues to assert himself as the number 2. A lot of people thought Dante Moncrief might get that job. He's had a lot of hype since coming into the NFL, but really hasn't lived up to it, playing with what I would consider one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Andrew Luck. Moved around to a couple different teams and has now landed with Pittsburgh. James Washington, 78 yards on 4 catches, including one where he ran back to the ball and made a nice catch. I really like what I'm seeing out of James Washington. However, we did see this last year in the preseason as well, and then he didn't necessarily live up to that in the regular season. So we'll have to see where that goes from here, but I am definitely liking what I'm seeing so far out of him. The next game up, it was the late night game on Saturday. Nope, I'm skipping the Lions and the Texans, but that's because there was nobody that really stood out for me in the Lions and Texans. The Lions did lose 23-30. The late night game, the Rams and the Cowboys in Hawaii. The Cowboys won the game 14-10. The big standout for me, Tony Pollard. 42 yards on 5 carries for an 8.4 average, 1 touchdown. Of course, a lot of talk now with Tony Pollard is, will the Cowboys be able to survive without Zeke because of Tony Pollard? If you guys heard the Jerry Jones interview, the reporter was just like laughing hysterically when he asked Jerry Jones, so does Tony Pollard make you guys forget about Zeke or something like that? And he said, who's Zeke? And the reporter laughed like it was the funniest thing you'd ever heard of. It was a little awkward to me. I really can't imagine that they're planning on going into the season with Tony Pollard as their main RB1. But I guess we'll see. He is showing out fairly well in the preseason, but he's still not Zeke. The interesting thing, though, for me in the Cowboys game, and I was able to watch most of it, was the way Michael Gallup and Devin Smith looked. So Michael Gallup, rookie last year, a guy that was high on a lot of people's boards, was just 1 catch for 31 yards, but I liked what I saw out of him even when he wasn't catching the ball. What I saw off the ball looked very intriguing to me, a guy I think could step up this year. And Devin Smith, so just 3 catches for 24 yards. However, if he's able to make this roster, for those of you who may have watched him at Ohio State, like I know I did, he's suffered a ton of injuries since coming into the NFL, but the dude has a ton of speed, and one of the things that you can't teach is speed. If he can end up landing on this roster and possibly being a deep threat for them, I think he could be an extremely intriguing option. Granted, I'm not a fan of Dak Prescott and the fact that he can't throw the ball that well deep. Devin Smith's still looking very interesting to me. Let's see here. What do we got? The next game here, we have the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday. The Saints winning this one 19-17. For the Saints side, I'm going to let Matt jump in and talk about Taysom Hill as he liked what he saw out of him. However, I want to talk about Devine Ozigbo. He looked very good rushing the ball, 8 for 30 for a 3.8 yard average, and receiving, though, 3 catches for 23 yards, 7.7 average, and a touchdown. A guy that could be very intriguing. I know you have Alvin Kamara there, and Latavius Murray as well, who is likely going to end up being, I think, the Mark Ingram player in that offense. I think he's going to walk in and take that role. We've already seen Sean Payton come out and say they are not increasing Alvin Kamara's workload just because Mark Ingram is gone. A lot of people think that they will. The coaches are coming out saying they're not. If they don't increase his role any, I don't know if Latavius Murray can hold up to what Mark Ingram did, so I would imagine Devine Ozigbo is going to get some run and some work. Very intriguing player, a rookie this year. I think that he could be in for a good year with the New Orleans Saints as possibly a low-end flex play, at least with what he's shown so far. Matt, tell me what you saw out of Taysom Hill in this game against the Chargers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned a runner for New Orleans because their leading rusher in that game was actually Hill, 53 yards on 5 carries. He also threw for 136, a couple of touchdowns, 11 of 15. I was kind of interested every morning, usually when I drive in the last couple of weeks, since I blissfully get to drive on my own, I listen to the NFL radio on Sirius. And this morning, Bob Papa and Charlie Weiss were talking about Hill and the chances. Charlie Weiss said from what he saw, he actually, in that game, saw a player that the Saints could be looking at as the future heir to Drew Brees, someone they could build the offense around. He seemed like the kind of player that Sean Payton would like and would like to build around. You see a performance like that, Teddy Bridgewater, I know they brought him back in for some insurance, but he's on a 1-year cap-friendly deal. It would be interesting, roster spots are so tough to come by in the NFL. It's always a bummer when you have to carry 3 quarterbacks. It would be interesting to see if they like what they've seen in Hill and think that he could actually suitably replace Drew if Drew got hurt. Interesting to see if they cut Bridgewater free or tried to trade him. Obviously, we've seen some teams that have some quarterback questions behind their starter and free up a roster spot for people like Ozigbo or people that they want to be able to squeeze onto their roster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely will be interesting because a lot of talk last year and why Teddy Bridgewater, at least it was believed why he went back to New Orleans, was to be the future behind Drew Brees. So if they end up going with Taysom Hill, that's going to allow Teddy Bridgewater to kind of possibly get back out there. And we'll see. I mean, obviously, ever since that injury, he hasn't looked the same. Didn't necessarily look great before that, although a lot of people were saying that he definitely looked better before the injury and was improving. So that'll be definitely something worth watching between those two, if both possibly make the roster or if they go with Hill over Bridgewater. On the Chargers side, there's a couple interesting things for me. I know me and Dennis were actually talking about this in a group chat, so I kind of wanted to get Dennis' thoughts on this. I know you didn't get a chance to watch the game, but Cardale Jones looked pretty good. I was someone who, when he got drafted by the Chargers, thought he might one day be able to replace Phillip Rivers in this offense. Now, Rivers, in the final year of his contract, though, he did come out and say that him and the Chargers are both open to negotiating into the future, but they're going to wait till the end of this season. Do you think Cardale has a chance to be the future in the Chargers organization?
I like Cardale a lot. He's got a big arm. For him, it's going to come down to being able to read the defenses. If he ends up only being able to read half the field, I don't think he's going to get a long-term shot. They're going to want to bring in somebody that they can essentially keep the offense they have. They've been on a good roll, and if Rivers retires this year or in 2 years, Keenan Allen is still pretty young. You've got Mike Williams, Hunter Henry. So completely changing that offense, maybe, but for the most part, you want to keep it rolling. When you've got a lot of momentum, you keep that momentum going. And so Jones, being in a good position to learn behind Phillip Rivers for another year, he's got the arm to stretch that defense. So I'm excited to kind of watch how he develops, if for no other reason than, I like the deep ball to Mike Williams, and I'm a Cardale Jones fan, being that I'm an Ohio State fan.
Yeah, the last player on the Chargers I want to touch on is Justin Jackson. So I thought he looked phenomenal on Sunday night. Just 33 yards on 8 rushes for 4.1 yard average, and then did add 9 yards on 1 catch, but looked very good and is someone that I don't think is necessarily getting a lot of talk ever since the Melvin Gordon stuff happened and him saying that he's going to sit out until he gets a new contract. Everybody immediately jumped on the Austin Eckler train, talking about how, well, he's always looked good, but Austin Eckler has suffered with injuries. Justin Jackson entering the league last year as a rookie out of Northwestern. He did have a huge workload on his legs in Northwestern, but was an absolute stud there. And they're being drafted fairly far apart. So Austin Eckler is going as the first running back out of those two. Obviously, Melvin Gordon going at 29 right now. Austin Eckler being drafted as the 64th running back off the board, which, sounds fairly late and worth the value. But then Justin Jackson is going as the 114th running back off the board with guys like Darwin Thompson and Alexander Madison. Give me Justin Jackson all day, as I do think if Melvin Gordon sits, which seems fairly likely at this point, you can get the value for Justin Jackson, a guy who's possibly going to outproduce Austin Eckler in that offense. He looked amazing in that game, and I'm excited to see what he does in Week 3. The last game on the weekend docket was with the Minnesota Vikings and the Seattle Seahawks late on Sunday night. So, not much for the Vikings side of things. I did like the fact that we saw a lot of the starters out there. Kirk Cousins had a couple good throws to Adam Thielen, who has just really been kind of balling out this preseason, has made a lot of really good catches. The player I wanted to touch on is on the Seattle Seahawks side, and interestingly enough, he is Dennis's boy, Rashad Penny. Now, Dennis is also a big believer and has always been a big believer in Chris Carson as well. Chris Carson looked much better than Rashad Penny. I know you mentioned earlier that Penny needs to stop cutting back and just needs to run pretty much north and south and stop trying to go so much east and west. But it really seems like he is not helping himself at all. So 6 carries for -2 yards in this game. Chris Carson, 5 carries for 25 yards. And then in the receiving game, just 1 catch for 3 yards. Rashad Penny, 2 catches for 10. What do you think about this backfield and the way that it's shaped out? Do you think that Penny is even going to still get possibly a 50-50 split like many thought he would going into the season? And then I want Matt, if you have an opinion on this backfield battle as well, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I think Chris Carson has essentially established that you have to take that job from him. He's also, I think, smart enough to know that he can't take every single carry. So when he has the opportunity, he's out there and he's producing. Penny is a good talent, but for whatever reason, he's, I don't know if he thinks he's just got so much more ability than everybody that he can get away from them. But sometimes taking a 5-yard gain and getting tackled is better than trying to take, turn a 5-yard gain into a 75-yard run. And we see that with a lot of young guys. They feel like they need to make every play needs to be a big play. And so hopefully Pete Carroll is able to coach that out of him. If that happens, I think he's going to be a very productive back, and both of these guys could put up some real good numbers this year.
Yeah, I think it's hard to feel incredibly confident in either of them. I guess I would prefer Carson too, because right now I'm with Dennis. This is like the higher yield option of the Sophie's Choice we faced in Tampa Bay with Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones. I mean, either of these guys could do anything, and it wouldn't necessarily surprise me. I think Carson looks like a safer bet right now. I have a couple of shares of him, so I'm at least hoping that he's good this year. As somebody who took a flyer on Penny in our Riders League last year, I will not be doing that again.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. Penny did start off the year slow last year, but did really kind of come on at the end of the season. So I'm interested to see if he can possibly turn it up and show up a little bit more here in these next 2 preseason games, assuming they play in preseason game 4. But definitely did not look good in yesterday's game. So that's all the games that we have seen so far. Before we get into previewing the Monday Night Football game, which again is between the San Francisco 49ers and Mr. Matthew Fox's Denver Broncos, Matt, you are a writer and editor for the FLA blog, and you have been doing a bunch of team previews. So I kind of want to get talk about the preview series you guys have been doing over there with the FLA blog, and then I want to hear your 5 most interesting teams going into 2019 and why they are your most interesting teams.
Yeah, we've done this the last couple of years. We do previews. We do one a day and goes over the course of actually about 35 days because we have an intro. We started on July 29th. We've made it through. We start with the Super Bowl champion, and we go through each division and then the corresponding division in the other conference. So obviously the Patriots won. We started with the AFC East. We do those 4 in order of finish and then move to the NFC East and then start with the North, alternating AFC and NFC. So today we actually started the NFC South with the Saints. And that's where I'm going to start with my 5 teams that I'm most interested in. Saints, back in the day, you always used to talk about the Super Bowl hangover for the team that didn't win and how would that impact them going into the next season. It would be hard to find a more brutal end to a promising season than what New Orleans had with the pass interference that wasn't. And they're obviously an incredibly talented team that comes back this year with a lot of that core intact. And they were a trendy Super Bowl pick last year. They'll probably be a trendy Super Bowl pick for some people this year. I'm just curious how much that's going to take out of them, coming back. It can be hard mentally coming back off of a season where you were so close and got crushed, especially when you lose in brutal or heartbreaking fashion, which they did, and then seeing the team that beat them go and fundamentally not show up in the most boring Super Bowl in the history of time could not have done any wonders. I mean, we're talking about a city where they boycotted the Super Bowl, so kind of curious to see how that impacts them coming out. The second team I would go to is the Indianapolis Colts. That's a team that I really liked coming in to this season. I think that they would be a potential team that I could see making it to the Super Bowl, but they have this huge question now with Andrew Luck hanging over them again. And, if he comes out on week 1 and plays the whole way through, I loved what we saw with him and Frank Reich last year, and they went out and got Devin Funchess and they added Paris Campbell, so they're trying to build some receiving weapons. They have 2 great tight ends. They still have T.Y. Hilton. They've worked on building their line, their defense. I felt like they were a really great sleeper team, but I don't know if I have the same kind of confidence if you're looking at Jacoby Brissett. For fantasy, I might put Jacoby out there, but I don't know if I would feel like they're a real Super Bowl contender. That would be kind of a blow. I know, Matt, you're really going to appreciate my 3rd pick team on this list, which is the Cleveland Browns. I was fortunate enough to write the preview for that team for our preview series. Really excited to actually see what they do and to see how they can follow up on last year. One of my best friends here at work, Elizabeth, they're her favorite team, and I have not seen somebody so excited about a football season as she has been this whole off season. I'm sure you understand what that's like. They're not a team that's going to sneak up on anybody this year because of the way they finished last year and because of the off season they had, but really excited to kind of see what they look like and bring some energy and some excitement, especially to a city that hasn't had that in a while. The 4th team on this list, our hated division rivals, the Oakland Raiders. I'm a huge Hard Knocks guy. I love all these NFL docuseries. I watch All or Nothing every year. But I love when Hard Knocks comes on, and it's hard not to get kind of caught up in the team, swept up in the team, and follow it through the season. That was one of the reasons I was following Cleveland last year after they were on Hard Knocks. But Oakland has been such a train wreck this offseason. They've had such highs and lows. I'm just curious to see how it all comes together, even though I really will never be able to root for Oakland as a diehard Broncos fan. I have always loved John Gruden, and I'm curious to see if he can actually get something done. Last year, I thought we would see something a little bit more than what we got. So I'm curious, if they can get Antonio Brown back. I think that's been one of the most intriguing teams the last couple of years with the players they've shipped out, with the players they've tried to bring in, with some of the off-the-wall draft picks they made. And then my final team will be my homer pick, the Denver Broncos. I am one of those people that believe our previous coach, who shall not be named, much like Voldemort, probably cost us a couple wins this season. Denver Bronco games have been incredibly tough to watch. I'm very excited about Fangio, having seen what he did with that Chicago Bears defense and Khalil Mack. He's got Bradley Chubb. He's got Von Miller. We have a really interesting secondary, so the defense has been good for a couple of years, could even go to a next level. It is really hard for me to jump on the Joe Flacco train. It's taking everything in me to remain positive about that, but Denver has so many potentially good young weapons. We drafted Noah Fant. We have Sutton and Hamilton. Emmanuel Sanders actually is so far ahead of schedule that he's making his debut tonight on preseason week 2 after blowing his Achilles tendon on December 5th. Phillip Lindsay, Royce Freeman. I feel like our offensive line is going to get better with Munchak. It would be nice to have a decent season, at least have a team that was fun to watch, because if you ask most Broncos fans, the last 2 seasons have been anything but fun on Sundays. Yeah, so that's my 5 right there.
Very
You're
nice.
not a big fan of Vance DeMort, huh?
You know what? Vance Joseph is probably the coach that's least equipped for his job that I've ever seen. I'm sure Arizona Cardinal fans have some regrets after they watched a Antonio Brownless Oakland Raiders offense destroy their first team defense in a preseason game on Thursday night. All I can say is prayers up. That's going to be your season.
Yeah, I was going to say possibly the most underrated signing of the entire offseason was Mike Munchak to that team. I think possibly the best offensive line coach in the game right now, so going over to a team that definitely needs to improve their offensive line. If he can turn them around and get them anything close to what he had done in, say, Pittsburgh, that it's going to be very interesting to see what that offensive line can do, especially with the 2 running backs they have there, which transition just perfectly into the Monday Night Football game.
We eating all day, bro. I'm hitting you every time. Every time you come is where I'm going to hit you. I'm not going to be able to do that. You don't want no problems, bro. You a little boy. I'm a man.
It's about to get ugly. I want to score. Yeah? You only talk so much. It's time to do now. Now just a good old-fashioned rear end whipping.
To the house, baby. I'm in a league of my own. They ain't ready for me. Are you tired? Are you tired? Let's go.
Good game.
Game previews. So the San Francisco 49ers are in Denver playing the Denver Broncos. Kickoff should be starting here in just about 20 minutes. Kind of want to get your take, obviously, on the Broncos. I want to start with the 49ers, though, as they are the visiting team. Would love to see what Jimmy Garoppolo can do. Obviously, a lot of talk about him throwing 5 interceptions in practice last week. We talking about practice, go full Allen Iverson here. Doesn't matter to me whatsoever that he did that in practice. Good for him. Interested to see if he plays much tonight, if at all, and what he does. Outside of him, though, not much going on for the 49ers, really. We know George Kittle is going to ball out. Would love to see how this wide receiver the wide receiver group shakes out, especially with Dante Pettis, Debo Samuel, Marquise Goodwin. Got a lot of very good wide receivers there. Who gets the 1, 2, and 3 jobs? And then, obviously, we know Jerick McKinnon is likely going to start the season on IR, so that gives you Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida at the running back position. For the Broncos, though, we obviously know, as you were just touching on, Joe Flacco looks to be and is going to be the starter, at least to start the season. A lot of good weapons on the outside, as you mentioned, in Deshaun Hamilton and Courtland Sutton. Also like Tim Patrick a little bit as well. Had a fairly good season toward the end of the year last year. The question I want to ask you, or at least start off with, is those running backs. So a lot of people, obviously myself included, Big on Philip Lindsay, think he is a phenomenal running back. There has been a lot of talk about his size and possible injury history. Holding up as the full 3-down back there, Royce Freeman has looked fairly good, or looked really good in the game last week. Did look good in the preseason, though, last year as well. So how do you think that this running back battle shakes out in Denver?
Well, I don't think that I would think of Lindsey as being the full 3-down back. I think it's going to be a committee no matter what. A lot of Royce Freeman last week, if you actually watched the game, was he had one 50-yard run. I'm pretty sure I could have gotten at least 40 yards on that their line, and particularly Andy Janovich just decimated the Seattle defenders. So Denver has suffered quite a few injuries, a couple of huge injuries. You know, they went out and made the splashy signing of Theo Riddick, which I thought meant Devontae Booker was likely gone. Riddick broke his shoulder. Thank you, Kevin Hogan. Will miss 6 to 8 weeks. Probably they think is going to start on the PUP list. So I think that helps Devontae Booker. But the bigger loss for someone, if you're a Royce Freeman fan, was Janovich, who has a partially torn pec, who is also going to be on 6 to 8 weeks. There is no running back I've seen in the last few years that makes a bigger difference running with a fullback than Royce Freeman. Philip Lindsay can create. He looked pretty good in the downs that he was in. He had a couple of plays called back because of penalties. I am curious. It doesn't look like Denver's going to have any kind of other fullback. They've talked about running more 2 tight end, but that's been a wasteland for them too. They have so many injuries. I think we only have 2 or 2.5 healthy tight ends to play right now anyway. I think that's going to have an impact on Freeman. Freeman, though, I would still think does early down work, gets more of the heavy formation goal line work, and then Philip Lindsay is going to, be out there running, especially in the middle of the field, more passing down situations. And I think we're still going to end up seeing Booker now. He is a better pass blocker than either of the other two. He's a somewhat decent receiver. That's damning with faint praise, but that's, I think, where we're at with the running backs for Denver. I think Lindsay and Freeman are locks. I'm curious to see if they end up keeping or if they can get some kind of flash from Khalafani Muhammad. He looked good in the Hall of Fame game, and no one looked good last week. So be curious. I actually think when they announced that Emmanuel was playing tonight, the fact that we are home and our game is on Saturday, I think there's a chance that our starters play quite a bit tonight. This is Denver's 3rd preseason game because of the Hall of Fame game. And with the schedule they have coming up, I don't think they would have activated Sanders to have him play one series. I think they may play quite a stretch tonight and not as much in the traditional 3rd preseason game.
Very interesting. We'll have to definitely watch out for that. Real quick before we get out of here so we can all watch this game, your thoughts on Drew Lock? Because I was someone who liked him coming out of college. Now, he hasn't looked great, but I think a lot of that comes from him moving into a different style of offense than he ever had to run in college. But I've not gotten a chance to watch all of the games like I imagine you have. So I wanted to get your thoughts really on Locke moving forward as possibly the future franchise QB in Denver.
Well, I think Joe Flacco's job is safe for all of this season for sure from what I've seen. The biggest disappointment for me is, I've talked before, those roster spots are precious, and Denver is a team that if they can only keep 2, would love to only have to keep 2. But from what I've seen of Drew Lock, he's obviously not going to get cut, but I wouldn't feel comfortable only carrying 2 based on what I've seen. He had some okay moments, I guess, in the second game. He looked disastrous in the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah.
And it was really tough last week to watch him moderately suck while Paxton Lynch was just jamming the ball down our throat. That was probably one of the more depressing football experiences I've ever had in the preseason.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people talking about that. A lot of Denver Broncos fans on Twitter talking about how good Paxton Lynch looks. Well, guys, before we cut out of here, obviously, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I am excited to continue doing this throughout the season. You will be back with us again on Thursday as we start ramping up for the season and kicking off what will be our weekly schedule, having you on with us Monday and Thursday. Before we get out of here, though, let all of our listeners know again where they can find you on Twitter and what you have coming up for the FLA blog.
Yeah, I'm at Nighthawk7734 on Twitter. I actually published the Saints preview today, and I personally did the Falcons preview, which runs tomorrow. Previewed the Chiefs and the Broncos, which are coming up. And you can find me every Thursday with the Fantasy Movie League preview.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to jumping on that movie league preview. Something I've been wanting to get into for a couple years but haven't. I might actually do that now this year if I'm able to learn some kind of key things for the Fantasy Movie League from you on Thursdays. Dennis, obviously, before we cut out of here again, let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter and if you've got anything in the works for the Dynasty Nerds.
Well, I at culture_coach, I want to say congratulations to our winners. Please contact us, send us a DM. Dub Diesel, John Hesterman, Perry Robertson, Danny Lopp, and Tim Torch. Reach out to us. Let's get your information, and we'll get that stuff sent out to you. Dynasty Nerds is rolling along great. Love the editing job there. And looking forward to rolling out new tools as they become available. We got the mock draft tool coming up any day now. At least that's what Rich says every time on the Dynasty Nerds episode. It's been coming in 2 weeks for about 3 months. But, if it's any if the ranking system and the buy-sell tool are any indication, that mock draft tool is going to be well worth the wait.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be right eventually that it's coming in 2 weeks. So we just got to figure out when eventually he's going to be right. That's all.
So, yeah, that's great. And then we've got Matt and I, we're going to be out at the Fantasy Football World Championships September 5th through the 8th at Las Vegas at the Palms Hotel. If you're in the area, swing by, say hi.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I talked about it a little bit in the intro there, but yeah, we're definitely looking forward to that. It's going to be hopefully an awesome experience. I know it seems like Jim Day and Scott Atkins, who are really kind of the heads of our full-time fantasy network that we are glad to be a part of, want us to possibly broadcast some of the drafts while we're recording, so we might be focusing on that. And then obviously me and Dennis will both participate in a Fantasy Football World Championship as well, and we'll definitely give you recaps of that either why we're there or when we come back at some point in time that week, maybe we'll do a Wednesday episode that week and kind of give you guys a full spectrum of everything we saw and how everything went, because it's definitely going to be a good time. But guys, both of you, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I can't wait to talk to you guys again on Thursday and enjoy the preseason game between the 49ers and the Broncos tonight.
Awesome. Have a great night. Right on.
Prepare for glory!
I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready?
I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly. Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line. Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
Say Metro by T-Mobile got the best deal in wireless, and it's all for you, all for me. Just switch quickly, because Metro has 2 lines for $80 and 2 Samsung Galaxy J7 Star phones for free, plus Amazon Prime included. That's the way wireless should be, only at Metro.
Plus sales tax and activation fee. $50 plus rate plan required. Not valid for numbers currently on T-Mobile network or on Metro in past 90 days. Offer subject to change. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Amazon Prime has a $12.99 per month value. Restrictions apply. See store for details and terms and conditions.
I can't believe it.
That Gerald is presenting the quarterly budget report with finger puppets?
Look, here comes a 1.7% decrease in fixed overhead. Hello, everybody.
No. I can't believe how easy it was to save hundreds of dollars on my car insurance with Geico.
Who are you? The projected increase in organic Q3 revenue. Hooray!
Believe it, Geico could save you 15% or more on car insurance.